Hola a todos, bienvenidos a este webinar de arquitectura. Les damos la bienvenida, gracias por acompañarnos. En esta ocasión, pues tenemos a un invitado muy especial, que además pues será nuestro profesor invitado este semestre. Él es, if I don't pronunciation is correct, Monish, you can say, yeah?
Sure.
Él es Monish Siripurapu. It's correct?
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, and this is a practicing architect from New Delhi. He graduated with a PG diploma from the Institute for Advanced Architecture of Catalonia in 2015 and founded the firm and studio in 2010. The studio believes that architecture is a balance of nature, sustainability, and emerging technologies. A large segment of their work involves experimentation with terracotta as a building material and readapting traditional construction techniques. And the name of the presentation today is Readapting Traditional Techniques Through Terramorphic Explorations. I think it's a pleasure to you are with us in this, and when you can start, you can manage. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David, for the very good introduction. Hey guys, nice to meet all of you virtually here, and then I'm really excited to show you our works that we're doing. And so, like David introduced me, I'm Monish. I'm the founder of Ant Studio. So, Ant. We are a very small team of architects, engineers, artists, designers, scientists, collaborating together to make something that probably as an individual studio or a design studio that is not possible. So the idea is to behind our practice is to bring together like people from different backgrounds and make something that is really something that is really helpful for the environment or nature. And so within a core practice, the main idea is to bring together art and technology, but keeping nature as a centric element in all our works. And how can we actually bring nature in different ways and forms into the environment, into the design and products or architecture. So when I started off, particularly, I'd like to show some of my older works before talking about terracotta. So when I started off, the kind of inspiration or the challenges that we used to pick from nature were quite different. For example, in this instance, I used to wonder what makes mushrooms magic mushrooms, and what happens if one day mushrooms want to actually convert themselves, and become something else. So we probably this is an installation where a mushroom is actually trying to becoming like a lotus. It's a kinetic installation that we proposed for a competition. And another instance where probably creating architectural elements in a building, like staircases, gates, whatever, into inspired by nature into art forms. So in this case, what if a staircase is like a fern leaf, and when people are walking on top of the staircase, the railing and these leaflets could move. So this was executed. This is the installation that we have done like very early days of my practice. One of the first installations probably that I have done using learning Rhino and Grasshopper as tools for computational design. And so this is particularly very special for me because this is where I actually started using probably the computational tools into design. Otherwise, earlier it was more manual and not using particularly in software and tools. So this is another project in the hills where the idea of the project was to merge the building and the landscape with the landscape, because this is a beautiful site with the Himalayas and the views in the front. So idea is that we wanted to actually blend the building with the landscape so that it becomes part of one. And it looks like these terraces that are prevalent in the mountains. so that every room in the house gets the view of the beautiful Himalayas in the front. This is covered in snow. This is a project again, like it looks like a snake or a form that actually sits on top of a building, and whereas there is this building existing on the top. So the idea in this building is that so when we got this project, we were given an option of removing the building on the bottom, this existing building on the bottom, and creating something on the top, which is, building from scratch. So what we suggested the client is to retain the building, not to break. Instead, we save the cost by not dismantling and refurbishing the building. And whatever we build on the top can be innovative, so that we are saving the cost of construction in the first place, which can be used for making something innovative in the, on the skin and above. So this project is almost about to get over now. And another building in the forest, wherein the whole idea behind the structure is that the building looks as if it is floating on the trees. The whole structural system is inspired by how the tree structure, taken by how the tree branches are around it. So today I'll be talking, so this is the kind of work that we do. Otherwise, apart from the terracotta and stuff, I just wanted to give a glimpse of the kind of projects that we do. So the main topic of the evening today is the terramorphic, which means that like how we actually, terra, which means land or earth, can be morphed or can be manifested in different forms altogether. And so that's how this word derived, terramorphic, showing that how we can actually, how we are, trying to manifest terracotta in different forms, whether it is like in the form of material and form explorations, which is very much artistic. There is no deeper meaning or anything, trying to show terracotta in different forms. And also, I'll be speaking about the passive cooling and the exploration that we are doing, where we are trying to readapt cooling techniques and like see how we can readapt in the buildings. And the third I'll be talking about is bioreceptivity and air purification, which is more like how terracotta can host bioreceptive moss and stuff, and can help in creating more fresh air inside the buildings. So the first few projects are like I said, will be more about the form. So these are some of the wall, like what we are doing. As a architect, when I started practicing, the main obsession was around how can we turn brick, and which is such a simple module, into different forms. Where what if we combine it with parameter architecture, and how every angle in the brick, the way that we place it, like challenging the bonds and everything, what can we create in there. So that is how I started. Like, 1 second. Yeah. So these are some of my early projects where I was, like I said, wanted to play with like brick quite a bit, trying to see what can be generated through computational design and then execute them in real. So this was a proposal for a boundary wall, wherein the main idea behind this was that this was supposed to be of length of 3 kilometers. So we want to demonstrate that we can make something really thin and delicate, but at the same time, it's very articulated in terms of the angles and everything. And eventually, this can be built with the help of a robot. So that, because by dividing this into modules of 2.4 meters by whatever the size 1.5 meters, we wanted to prove that, okay, we want to make one module, but then eventually constructions like this, very simple, like boundary walls and stuff, can be made using robotic fabrication on site. So this is what we were trying to demonstrate here. And another project in which here we were showing the brick in on ground in terms of patterns and creating a different kind of experience on the floor. This is another project where the wall is nearly 6 meters in height, and it's pretty long. And we wanted to show that instead of creating entrances to the buildings using huge gateways, so we wanted to demonstrate that it can be done in a much more spacious and elegant manner using simple material and playing with textures on the brick. So this is how it looks once complete. it shows the scale of the person. Yeah. Now, these are some of the recent projects now in the pipeline, where for residences, I mean, we're showing that how brick can be such a simple material can be very artistic and like trying to uh, redefine the character of the buildings here. Especially in India, I mean, there is a typical mindset that exposed bricks, it's not everybody's taste. Not everybody wants to make a building with exposed brick. So our main challenge or the is here is that how can we break that notion and share that okay, bricks can also be very exposed brick can also be very artistic and at the same time playful. We don't have to build the typical way of uh, like with the existing bonds. We can innovate with the textures and the forms and everything. This is a project, again, one of my very early projects called AK Electronics, wherein here it's a factory and the idea was to create an environment which is very warm and subtle so that for the factory, because it's a very stressful environment, gives something that is really earthy and soothing for the users. And not only just that, because the being a factory, the usage is like very, they want it to be maintenance free and very robust. So we proposed a typology of the brick, which is a three-dimensional again wall using what do you say, computational analysis and stuff. So that the idea here is that uh, it can generate this light. I mean, if you see the light that's falling from on the top, it's like a skylight where there is actually no room for a window, this being a boundary wall. And at the same time, these create this really beautiful small niches where people can just sit and enjoy their meal in the cafeteria. And some of the projects were trying to blend this with different forms. This is a recent project that we executed. I don't have the finished images in the presentation, but yeah, we just finished this project. This again combining exposed with modern forms. So basically, terracotta means that baked earth, which is can be in any form. So far I have shown you exposed brick, how we try to uh, use it in different forms, and like I said, how we can actually carve out different patterns and shapes and all that. But the next couple of projects show you how we were trying to use terracotta in different forms as art in buildings. So this is Anahat, the same building I showed you earlier, which has a very fluid form on the existing building. So if you notice, there are these roof tiles on the roof, which we had to remove so that we can make that building on top. These are the roof tiles on the top. You see my mouse. So we recovered almost 7,000 tiles from this the project, when we removed them. So the idea is either we can actually repurpose it for something or throw them in a landfill. So we didn't want to throw these tiles in the landfill. So we convinced the client that what if we make like a feature wall in the living room in the same place instead of throwing these. So we ended up making a form like this. This is some of the images from the construction. So a very modern form, again, using computational tools. But like we wanted to show that, okay, instead of actually like throwing materials like this, which are beautiful, what if we can repurpose this and readapt within the project so that they can actually look very, the form is really playful and artistic. At the same time, it's not a typical terracotta wall. So the client was convinced looking at the forms. I mean, the whole idea is that we can, to demonstrate that we can use terracotta, which is a very simple material, in also in a very modern way using computational tools. So another installation where again we wanted to show that terracotta again can be used in not only just as an art installation, but also can probably highlight the social like an issue. So if you see on the top right, pangolins. So just before this, this was a workshop that I had conducted in Delhi last year in 2020. So just before this, I read an article in the newspaper. It said that, I mean, we always keep reading something or the other in the news. So, but till the time it really happens in your backyard, you don't know the seriousness of it. So I read this article that in a city, a pangolin was killed when it came on the road from the forest, an Indian pangolin, and because they thought that it looks completely wild, and it is something that is not just harmful. They thought it is something wicked, probably looking at the whole shape and everything, because people are not used to like creatures like this. So they killed it because they thought it is something that is not holy. I mean, I don't know the right word for this. I'm able to explain. They thought this is something evil. So that really, but looking at it, I mean, I found this extremely beautiful. If you look at the texture and the shape and everything on the top, it's such a beautiful creature. But again, because people lack of knowledge and information about creatures like this, that they tend to think of them as harmful, evil, and whatnot. And we also heard about pangolins being one of the most endangered species, because people traffic these species for the scales and everything. And recently, we also heard rumors about how this caused COVID and all that. So the idea behind this installation again is that, taking inspiration from these natural forms, create a pavilion that kind of inspires people to like and also talk about it. I mean, talk about these the species through the installation, not just make something that is standing there and beautiful, but also probably talk about an issue. So that was the main idea behind the pavilion. And we used terracotta tiles there, which was CNC cut. And again, like as part of the pavilion and the workshop, the idea is also that how can we make it with like minimum number of components. So there are just 3 components in it, and they're all mass produced. If you look at the curvature of each of these arcs, it is 2.4 meters, which is fixed. The curve length varies, and there are these tiles. Again, all the tiles are the same. And I have this flexible clamp that was designed to fit the tiles, combine these things. So these are the 3 main primary components that are designed for this. But the form, when they come together, it's totally can create a shape that is not streamlined, and this thing, it's very organic, and it has something that's not very symmetric. That was the idea behind this pavilion. This is how it looks. So there are 3 the layers. So the first one is arcs with the clamps and the tiles on top of that. So I hope everything is clear. I hope my is there any questions, or should I go slow? Jessica, am I being slow? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the second part of the presentation, where I'll be talking about the cooling system that we are working on like for the last few years, and the main and what we are doing with it. So as we all know that the cooling is it's a vicious circle, especially talking about air conditioners. So in the process of trying to cool up buildings, I mean, we first of all consume a lot of energy, there are emissions, and the compressors also generate a lot of heat, causing a lot of impact on the environment. So there's an amazing stat that we discovered while working on this. So if you look at this graph on the top right, just in 2 days in 2019, the amount of emissions that the carbon dioxide was released in the environment is equivalent to just 2 days in 1902, when air conditioners were introduced. So by 2050, that there are chances that we'll be needing 1 billion air conditioners, by the way that the consumption is increasing. This is a graph for India, especially in India, like which is such a huge population. There is an increase of 15% every year in the usage of air conditioners among the people that you're using. And I mean, just compare it. Like what happens if so right now only 5% of the population are using air conditioners. So what happens is goes like 30%, 40%, 50%. There is going to be tremendous impact and on the energy needs, and which also like I think it's going to be a global hazard for carbon emissions in the future. So like here there's an example. I mean, India is probably one of the first few countries to come up with a cooling action plan, where they have addressed and highlighted the importance of hybrid passive and active cooling systems. How can they be probably a solution for air conditioners? So the research that we are doing is primarily based on how can we readapt traditional techniques that were there in the past and combine modern technology to it to formulate a solution. So when we started working, we were looking at some of the solutions from the past. This is a very important case study for us in which in Egypt, the pharaohs used to get cooling by filling earthen pots with water and just fanning the surface of these pots. And this another building in India called Lotus Temple. There's a water bed on the bottom wherein it creates natural cooling with aircraft as it passes, as the air passes through the water bed and comes onto the top. So there are thousands of examples like this in the past, where in traditional like forts and havelis and stuff, where architecture of the building is helping in creating this passive cooling in the environment within the building. And so our idea is actually to see how, with the help of like I said, the modern tools and techniques, how can we readapt these techniques? Because we cannot say that whatever was happening in the past, if we use them the same way, things are going to work, because the temperatures change, the needs have changed, and a lot of things have changed in the last 100 years. And like, I mean, we want better solutions to be available right now. And clearly, air conditioners can give us better thermal comfort than talking about passive systems and passive cooling techniques. So our idea is behind this work is that how can we, like, if not replace air conditioners, probably challenge the usage or even reduce the amount of air conditioners that are used in the building by at least maybe like trying to provide solution for 30 to 40% of the spaces where we can probably remove an air conditioner and put a passive cooling or a hybrid cooling system instead. So this is the first project that we did in a factory called Deki Electronics, where we have installed a beehive in front of like a DG set. So what this DG set does is it provides electricity to the whole building. So, but in the process, it generates a lot of heat waste, and that too at a very tremendous velocity, like 50 meters per second velocity of air comes through this machine on the top left. So our first installation, when we thought of doing this cooling through terracotta, we proposed a brick lattice structure like the way you see. This was an experiment. So we built this full height and we poured water on top of this, and we let the air circulate through this. So we have noticed that there is substantial drop in temperature, but there is no clear indication as to what and how this is working. And but the experiment worked for us. So this led us to actually come up with an installation where we thought, okay, why not actually try something with earthen tubes instead of bricks, so that these tubes also can be designed with the help of analysis, CFD analysis, where we can probably predict the length of the tube that is necessary and the diameter that is there, that is probably optimum for reducing the temperature here and bringing it down. So this is what the outcome of this experiment. So we created these pots that like lock into each other to create a pot of length 1 meter. Yeah. And we stacked these pots in front of this DG set in the form of a beehive. So the reason being, one, the geometry is really effective. It can be made with the help of potters. We don't really need any complex machinery or systems to manufacture this. And at the same time, we're getting both the inner surface and also the outer surface for cooling. So what made it like really impactful here? So in the factory, and we were able to bring the temperatures down drastically. And but there is something here that we must all understand. In evaporative cooling, the temperatures are very dependent on the relative humidity and the atmospheric conditions, the outside, the water temperature, and a lot of factors. So in here, like I said, in peak summers in India, the temperatures go beyond 50 degrees, and especially in front of this DG set. So for us, the challenge is to bring this temperature down to maybe mid 30s, so that we are still able to provide thermal comfort that is may not be a really cool in, like an indoor environment, but still that is bearable for the workers in the factory. So this is how it was made, the frame and how it was done. So later we wanted to not stop there. We wanted to try different iterations for the same idea, where we wanted to plug this system like in a pre-made structure like this, where the installation becomes super fast and easy, and there are more air gaps. We can play with the apertures and so on. And we have done this installation in a city called Lucknow in India, another installation. And now the whole idea is how can we take this particular the product onto buildings? How can we readapt them in building facades and screens so that we can help in reducing at least some part of the temperature inside the building, if not all. So this is something that we have been doing for the last couple of years, like how we can adapt it to the buildings. So this was a office space in New Delhi where we installed it. This is how it looks from inside. And a school where, especially in education sector, in schools and institutions and colleges, it is very difficult to cool the buildings with the help of air conditioners because the cost becomes really high and the usage is quite a lot. So our idea is again to complement this need with passive cooling, so that this is how the window module could work. It's like a double skin thing where we have a window and then there's an earthen pot installation outside that can help in creating this cooling. So yeah, so those are some of the work that we have been doing for the past, like I said, couple of years, where the main idea is to see how we can readapt these systems into the built environment and come up with something that is, what do you say, low tech and low on maintenance, low on electricity consumption, and also because the material is totally emission free and also eco friendly. After the life cycle, the material does not end up in a landfill in any of these cases. It can disintegrate with the help of water and become earth again after the usage. That was the end of part 2, which got cooling. So, 1 second. I hope I'm being clear and slow. Any questions, or should I stop or continue?
I think we can continue, and at the end,
yes. Okay. So the last part of the this is the last part of the presentation, bioreceptivity, and what we discovered, I think, in the whole process, it's quite an amazing learning experience for us as well. That terracotta is it is porous in nature. That's how it retains water within the material, which can help in cooling. And this is amazing because it can actually become a really good host for growing living organisms on top. We must have seen this in many of these existing roof tiles or walls, where this moss naturally grows on top of these earthen pots. And for the first couple of years, so whenever people used to ask us about the maintenance of the installation, the previous thing that we did, what really happens to it, how can we avoid moss and the growth of these things. So we used to say that, okay, the solution is really simple. We just have to, if you want to kill that, you can just add a few drops of chlorine in it, and that's the end of the story. You can make sure that there is no moss or any growth happening on the top. But we realized that that was quite stupid, because moss in itself is extremely, if you can amplify the growth of this on terracotta, it can act as a really good source for air purification, because scientifically it has proven that moss has the property to sequester carbon dioxide in the environment at least 5 times its weight. So what we started doing from now then onwards is that how can we utilize this property of the terracotta not only just for cooling. So what if we can come up with ideas and strategies where that can also help in certain way in air purification. So this was an experiment in progress, I must say. So we are trying to work with some organizations to see how we can implement this concept and see if we can come up with public installation that can help in purifying air as well, not just for cooling. So this was the first experiment, what we call as binary, because here we are trying to do both cooling and also vertical greens at the same time in the installation. It's not about air purification, but in the pots we wanted to combine along with cooling. What if we can integrate these plants inside the system within this pot, so that this can also help in creating a vertical garden on top of the facade or the elevation. So by doing this, the idea is that we can eliminate plastic, because typically when you talk about a vertical garden or like a green wall, the ironic that there is so much of plastic that's used on the backdrop. So in this installation, the main idea is how can we probably replace that with earthen pots. So instead of using plastic buckets or boxes, we can actually use this pots itself for as part of the facade, and try to get both cooling and greens at the same time. So the moss experiment led us to something what we named as coral, because the shape of it looks like corals that are actually underwater. So here the idea is that what if we can come up with a tower which is 360 degrees like this, wherein we are drawing all the air inside, cultivate moss, the growth on top, so that can help in purifying air in public spaces. So this is what we made for an art exhibition in art festival in India, in Goa, wherein these are all handmade earthen pots stacked radially. And the idea behind, again, like I said, is that it's a 360-degree installation that can throw cool air on all the sides. And so typically, the need for systems like this is mainly in summers, but in winters, these are not used. So the idea is, what if in winters, these systems can actually become air purifiers, because that's when the air pollution is a lot, especially in India and many places where in winters, the pollution levels increase drastically. So this is how the system looks. So what you see on the screen is a system that we have tried out in ceramic instead of terracotta in this case. So wanting to try, we are trying with various porosity of the material, porous ceramics, and varying the porosity of the material to check how we can amplify and test the performance of the product. So the idea is that we can actually suck the air radially into the center. And because the air is going to enter from a wider aperture and it comes to the center through a narrower aperture, there's also a pressure drop that can help in also cooling. And at the same time, we are optimistic that it can also help us in air washing at the same time. So that one thing led to another. So there's a final installation that we are proposing now, inspired the same concept again, using now terracotta planes. This is very modular, and the whole system is inspired based on the concept of Venturi 8th rubber, where basically it's a system where the idea is to facilitate growth of moss on top of these plates that you see and suck the air inside, and in the process clean heavy air particles, the pollution particles in the environment in the process, and actually create these public installations and spaces, especially in public spaces, roundabouts, traffic corners, and stuff that can be helpful for purifying air. Yeah. So, like I said, it's an experiment that we are conducting currently to check this hypothesis and see how it goes. So, hopefully, this year we'll have something coming out of this. So this is the last project. So whole idea is that the way that we are heading forward is that how can we combine these the new and evolving tools and techniques, and then probably change the way that we look at buildings. And this is a project in which we wanted to challenge the way atriums in the building look, because atriums consume a lot of energy for at least for cooling and all that, and they are huge spaces in the middle for common gathering. So the idea in here is that, what if at least, if not 100% of the buildings, what if we can take certain areas of the building and kind of propose alternative solutions or design solutions that can help in facilitating growth or on top of the buildings. Like this is a bamboo lattice structure in which we are proposing greens on top. So that can be both looks. In the current trend, the state of the art using parametric tools, the form can also be very futuristic. At the same time, it can be very much integrated with nature. So that was the idea, and we are hoping that in the future, we'll get chances and opportunities to make buildings like this that can be living organisms more than just spaces that can help in many ways, purifying air and like creating a quality of spaces, and maybe why not vegetation or so on. I mean, like they can be like really living organisms, be providing good air, good quality, and yeah, and they can act like how trees used to be. Trees they can function like trees in within the buildings. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. That's about the presentation. I would like to hear some comments and questions.
So I don't know if someone from the audience have some questions. If not, I would like to start with one question, Manish, which I
Yes.
think it's. I think some of the people from the audience would be as well questioning how much your projects are experimental in terms of getting the client and people who will pay for it. I mean, is it still really hard from your point of view to get to the people who will be really willing to go for this kind of experimental projects? How do you manage that part?
Yeah. Actually, the thing is, it's always the first project that is challenging to get. And for us, in that case, Deki Electronics was a project that we got. I mean, also, the interesting part is that we were invited to do actually an art installation in the project, not particularly um, probably a cooling installation or anything. And so the idea was that, we wanted to make that is functional art, not just an abstract installation that can probably block the air. Because in that case, I mean, the idea was that, if you block the air, it can go back to the system and reduce the efficiency of the machine behind. So like I said, I mean, the first project is always the most challenging one. And once we prove that in the first project what we are able to do, I think that can give us another opportunity, and we stick to it. It can give us more opportunities and so on. And so now, even today, I mean, we try and propose a lot of these, and at the risk that, I mean, especially from the client perspective and the payment perspective, sometimes we also try to work with probably zero profit sort of a thing, with the main objective being that, we have to implement it so that for us also, it's like an opportunity to see whether the system works or not, and what are the like, how we can improvise it, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think these are challenges that are there. And for us, especially in the last few years, uh, like winning grants and competitions helped us sustain the experimentation bit of it. So we do apply to a lot of competitions and grants and everything, so that we can continue with this experimentation and do what we are doing. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your answer. I think someone is asking.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to read the question or you want me to read it for you.
Does the moss grow naturally on terracotta? It needs special conditions to grow on it. So in this, that, it is, if you let water grow, it's a time consuming process. Moss grows slowly on top of that. But if you really want to amplify it, it's also like good to uh, probably add seeds and everything to amplify the process. So that is quite possible. And special conditions, I think humid conditions are really suitable for growth of moss. And so if it is not extremely hot and then there are humid conditions inside, I think it's really good for moss to grow. And also the water, especially, I mean, another thing that we need to check is that if the water is too saline and too much salts in it, then it kills the moss. So what another factor that depends is also the quality of water for the growth.
We also have a couple of questions in the Q&A panel. I don't know if you want to check them.
Okay. So yeah, I'm checking the Q&A panel.
Can you see the questions?
Yeah, I can see the last question I see is, does moss grow naturally on terracotta planks?
No, that's in the chat.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see it now. What do you think?
I can read it for you.
Architecture. Yeah, I'm reading the questions. How do you think? Yeah, if you want to read for others, I think that's good.
Yeah, the first question says, hello, thank you for the lecture. I think your studio has done an incredible job blending architecture with nature. How do you think other architecture studios can start implementing nature into the designs to start evolving cities into environment-friendly cities?
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's very important that to see how we can open the buildings to nature. Especially, I mean, there are many ways to do that, like through courtyards and through like really smart design strategies that we can open up the buildings to the environment in the first place. Because if you look at the modern way of designing, most of the buildings, the way they're designed are shut, and we really depend heavily on the air conditioning inside. So that so that has become a design norm. I think if in the design strategies we can talk about cross ventilation and natural ventilation in the buildings and how we can open up, bring in like nature, like in the form of trees and greens, vertical gardens inside. I think that'll be a really good way to do it, and having a lot of these courtyards and spaces. So that what happens is that when air circulates through the building, I think that's a very important factor. That it also cleanses the whole space. It's not just about cooling or something. It really brings in a new energy into the building, and I think that's something that's really important for in the design. So I think if, already a lot of studios are doing that, but I think if everybody does it, that way I think it can be really helpful in creating very environmental friendly cities.
And someone else is asking, why do you think it's important to find inspiration on nature?
So it's really amazing. I mean, if you observe every element in nature, I think especially I am fascinated by the way the whole universe has evolved. And if you look at the species, I mean, there are like billions of species when you talk about like in on land, in water, in air. If you look at birds and fish and all of that, I mean, the way nature has evolved is extremely beautiful, and it's scientific. The way our body or the geometry or the way like everything has adapted according to the environment and everything is beautiful. It's like so I think there is a lot to learn from nature for us. I think especially when we're talking about designs and everything, and even if you look at that kind of evolution, for that matter, in this context, if you're talking about just air conditioning, it's only 100 years old, and which is probably, if you look at the nature's life cycle, it is nothing. So for us, I think always looking up to nature on like how things have evolved and taking inspiration for that into buildings, I think is really important. We learn a lot in the process. So I mean, even if you look at great examples, great innovations in the past, like even flight, how aerodynamics work have been absorbed using the way birds conduct the flight and so on. So there is there is tremendous amount of knowledge over there. I think so. It's not only form that we need to seek inspiration from, but also the mechanism and how things really work in nature. I think that's for us. I think it's really important to look up to nature to like seek answers and learn something.
And another question, is there any animal you want to make an structure inspired on?
Oh, this is, I think every time we really want to, like, I don't know, we have been constantly doing all this all the time. Most of our projects and installations are inspired by animals and things. So, like for me, my dream project is to actually create this tortoise-like shell for an airport. So, but the shell entirely, I mean, even though the form can look like that because it's like a really robust shell, beautiful form with like amazing detail and geometry on top. But then it can still be a very like ductile and kinetic. So something can really happen with that kind of a thing. So that's something that I've been dreaming for a long time. So maybe I think something like that, if comes up, will be really interesting to see. So that would be my dream project to make.
So the next question, okay, what challenges does your studio faces in India related to pollution and industrial advances?
So pollution is a very serious thing, especially in Asia right now, in Asian cities, Southeast Asia, India, China, and all these places, and it's growing everywhere. So the challenge is that a lot of people are trying a lot of solutions, which is amazing. So we know institutions and universities here working on smog towers and looking at different kind of solutions for this problem. And it's really interesting to see that a lot of people are actually working towards that. So I think for us, I mean, the reason why we are working with this kind of a system is especially because we wanted to try something without filters, using natural filters, especially when you look at any kind of filter, HEPA filter, which have proven to be very effective for this cutting down pollutants in the environment. But they get them with the amount of pollution that we have, they get really choked very fast and they don't really last for a long time. So that makes it really expensive for the filters to keep changing all the time, so that it becomes like, so that is my hypothesis. So that's the reason why probably filter-based systems might not be a long-term solution for problems like this, or they could be very highly expensive. So what we are trying to do in cases like this is to see, like, very low-tech and cheap, and especially, I mean, if you can look at bio-based solutions for this, I think nothing like it. If we can, I mean, we are at a very nascent stage, and we're really hoping to work with scientists in this area, wherein we can actually combine the water that we are circulating here in the installation with maybe some kind of enzymes that can live on these pollutants in the environment, so that they can constantly keep it. It becomes like I said, it's like a living organism, wherein we are feeding it with this pollutant particles, and then the whole system is we don't have to change anything, filters in it, or maybe you can keep changing water regularly, or filter the water, so on and so forth, to maintain certain pH values and so on. But otherwise, it has to work like a living organism where everything is taken care of. So, like I said, in India, where especially the population is really high, it's very important for us to look at solutions that are not super expensive and which are very robust. Also, because, like I said, the demand and the need is like huge over there. And talking about industrial advancements, we do have, I think, especially in the cities, access to a lot of these machines and technologies and tools. No doubt about it. But which also means that the towns and the smaller cities, they might not have all of these solutions. So for us, I mean, the way that we are working, we are trying to work with local craftsmen and labor, and try to work with tools, so that whatever we are doing, we are also able to execute it in places where there are no access to these industrial machines. So, I mean, that's the reason why we keep a lot of our work very low tech, and or at least like a combination where majority of it is low tech, and maybe there are certain components we can get, like probably digitally fabricated or something, so that we can bring them to the site, and the rest of them can be made locally, and so on. So that way we can counter the industrial challenges, the lack of probably machines and stuff in remote places. So yeah, so these are some of the strategies that we are working on to the problems that we have here.
And I think this is the last question. Did you predominantly use Rhineland grasshopper after drawing inspiration from nature to make it functional? How do you educate the client on maintenance after installing coolant methods like the earthen pots on facades? Also, how is the response on the parametric brick facades from the client side in India?
So yeah, I think it's very important that we pick the right kind of tools for the right kind of design language that we want to work on. And for me, when I started working with these parametric tools, it was like instant love affair, because I could never. I mean, I used to make a lot of sketches and everything. It used to be very frustrating before, Rhino and Grasshopper, like, parametric tools, because I used to find it very difficult to like design something that I was thinking in the head. It was never, it was very difficult. So after picking up the tools, what happened is that at least in the first phase, my demonstration skills have increased. At least I'm able to now show the people what I'm thinking. So that's first step. And now if they're letting you make and how it's going into fabrication, that's the second step. So I think in the beginning, for me, when you talk about clients, uh, like I used to approach with smaller scale projects. Like I said, my initial installations were like staircase and small installations, which are not very big. And even for the client, they are like, okay, fine, try, why not? You can also try it and check. So it's a small piece, maybe only 5% of the project. So no harm in experimenting. So the rest of it, so he can do it his way and I can do my way and so on, sort of a thing. So slowly, I think that equation has changed when people started seeing that we can execute. And for me also, it gave a lot of confidence that we can do stuff and show people, especially in India, where it is still a very new domain, parametric design. So, I mean, I'm talking about 5 years and 6 years before that, when we used to do, it was still pretty new. Not many people were doing it back then, 6, 7 years ago. So wanted to show that, okay, now if you're doing it, they saw, they like, and then they said, okay, so when I should go to the next project, so they maybe gave me a better, I mean, a bit more equation, maybe 10% this time, and so on. So that's how the response from the clients like really came across, and we were able to do more in the uh, later. And talking about the second question, how do you educate your clients on maintenance? So here, this is the thing. I mean, we created a lot of these manuals and website, and where we talk about it, we try and explain. And like I said, not all clients are very pro and really cool about this MOS and air purification. They don't want. Some people straight away say no. They say that no, I don't think we need it. We want something very clean. So, like I said, it's very easy. We tell them that if you just use chlorine in water, it could be what do you say? It will make sure that there is no moss or anything growing on these other pots, so you can keep it clean. So it's ultimately up to them. So they just have to drop a few drops of chlorine in water. So that's a solution for those who don't believe in it. And so that's the reason why we are now also proposing independent installations, which are like in public spaces where the human interaction is less. So they can work around creating probably a decent thermal comfort zone around the installation. But the main objective for that could actually be purification, so that they're slightly far off from human interaction, they can work and so on and so forth. So that's another strategy. That's the reason why we're working on isolated installations for air purification. And how is the response in parametric big facades? Well, yeah, I think that's something that that's really improving. So especially in the beginning, I have lost even some projects when people said, "Oh, you work with a lot of brick." So I know for us, brick is not the material. We don't like brick. We don't want to do that. So I have come across clients like that. But recently, I mean, when we show that you can actually do very innovative stuff with brick in using parametric design and stuff. So like in the recent past, I mean, the clients that come in probably they also match the same taste. So there is not much of a challenge over there to convince them. And there are some people still who come to us and say that, okay, no, brick is not a material, we want something else. But if you still insist, maybe you can do probably like a feature wall or installation in the house with brick, you know. So I mean, they just because they want to work with us, they say that, okay, you can try some area and take it, but we don't want brick in the elevation or the facade. You can try it in different places. So I think that's the kind of response we are getting. And but I think mostly people, when they see the work, they, even though they're not if even though I mean, even if they're not convinced about brick earlier, we have seen cases where they liked the work and they were okay with doing brick. So yeah, it's definitely the response is improving a lot. So I see one more question on the chat. What advice would you give to the students? So I think it's, I mean, it's really, from my experience, what I can share is that I think if you start doing things, even if whatever scale, small, big, any scale, I mean, doesn't matter. So the moment we start doing things, I think that's where that's what the game changer is, because a lot of people really connect to stuff that's already built. I think that's what happened in my case. That because I have this experience of actually taking really fancy renders and showing it to people and saying that, okay, this is how it is going to be, very complex and so on. And then we take probably less complex stuff, but that's already executed, and we show it to people. And the reaction is that people tend to incline towards stuff that's already built, not something that's probably an amazing design masterpiece, but that's not built. They don't relate to it. So that's what my experience is. So what I would suggest people is that, instead of like waiting for a big day and a big project or like a huge thing, I would say take any small thing and start making it. I mean, show people how we can manifest things in real, not just whatever the design that's on paper. We can show them that we can make prototypes, and we can make what do you say, small scale installations and artwork. And because especially, I mean, for us, in our the kind of work that we are doing, these pavilions and other installations that we're doing are very important, because they act as our prototype for probably a bit more complex architectural project that could come later. So every time that we do, so we also learn something from that pavilion or an installation, and we use it as a, like I said, an experience gainer for probably executing something much more larger in a real scale project. So yeah, I think that would be my advice. Make things. So yeah, and yes, keep upgrading your skills. I think that's really important. Skill is something that everybody should try and improvise. So yeah, I think any other questions, Jessica?
Yeah, I think those are all the questions. And I mean, it's super interesting, all what you're doing. I'm a big fan of your work. Actually, I follow you. And
Thank you.
yes, well, thank you very much sharing your work with us. I think the students really appreciate it, and all the audience. I don't know if
And thank you so much for having me also.
to say something, otherwise I think we just finish the lecture here. What do you think? I think we can just finish it here. I don't know if you have any other comment, Manish?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jessica, for having me here, and thank you everyone and for being there. And yeah, if there are any other questions, otherwise, or like if there's something that like we can do, our studio can help you with, or feel free to reach out. I'll be more than happy to assist you in any of the things that you guys are trying at a best capacity. And thank you, David and Georgie, for again for inviting me, having me here, and I think it's really great pleasure. I wish this was real, but for the given the situation it is, um, really happy to be here. And yeah, stay safe, all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manish.
Thank you, Manish.
Some of the students will see you on Monday. So we start our worship with you.
So yeah, great. Nice.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
See you.